Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. We've already got a comment in the comment section that I know Dave wants to get to. Justice coming in saying, the Air Raid Hour fucks so hard. Like Travis Henry, this show fucks. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined, as always, by my co-host, Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. And we are also joined, if we haven't already been blocked, by the YouTube the censors here. We are joined by the artist formerly known as producer Kendall, now Kendall Mirsky, Cover One Everyman. You can find him on Twitter at Mirsky Kendall. Together we are the Bills guys, and we are presented by the Cover One Sports Network. And listen, guys, it's Monday, February I don't even know what it is, February
7th.
So next hour and a half, we're going to break down the Pro Bowl, right? We're just going to break down.
Oh God, don't do that to me.
Every single thing that happened in the Pro Bowl. You had Stephon Diggs on Trayvon Diggs on a couple of occasions. I only know this because I saw them on Bradley Gelber's Twitter page. I refused to watch the actual broadcast. Mac Jones dropped the gritty. It's called the gritty. They were playing practically two-hand touch. So the only really good thing that we need to talk about the Pro Bowl is that Stephon Diggs and Deion Dawkins did not get hurt. I think that's all we need to say about the Pro Bowl. And we're going to talk.
There was a really funny clip someone made on Twitter where they basically were like Pro Bowl this year, and it showed like the two-hand touch. Then they showed like Pro Bowl 20 years ago, and it was like Sean Taylor laying out Brian Moorman.
Right,
it was pretty good.
I can't tell if he was like being paid a lot of money to say this seriously, or if Steve Levy was saying this sarcastically. But there was like one play where one of the linebackers just like two-hand touched the running back, and Steve Levy's like, yeah, and the linebacker just absolutely laid out the running back there in the flat, and it was just a two-hand touch. Like he didn't even tackle the guy. So I'm not sure if ESPN was just paying him to make it sound good, or if he was being sarcastic.
Steve Levy's been at ESPN for like 30 years. He could say whatever he wants, pretty much. I mean, he was just trolling on that at that point.
Yeah.
All right. So for those of you who haven't seen yet, again, we're going to talk Senior Bowl prospects that fit the Bills. We're going to have Russ Brown, Cover One's draft expert, joining us at around 9:15, 9:20 to break it down for us. We're going to talk the prospects that had a big week. We're going to talk the prospects that fit the mold for the Buffalo Bills. One piece to maybe the running back and offensive line puzzle to help us sort of in this analysis came today when the Buffalo Bills, if you haven't seen it yet, have named an offensive line coach officially. It was officially broken by his daughter, Brooke Cromer. And then the Buffalo Bills officially announced that the Bills have added or re-added Aaron Cromer to the coaching staff as offensive line coach. He was the Buffalo Bills offensive line coach in 2015 and 2016. Both years, the Buffalo Bills led the NFL in rushing yards. He was the Rams offensive line coach and run game coordinator up till last year. Picked a bad year not to be retained as they're in the Super Bowl currently.
That's tough.
But I'll tell you what, the Fitz-Gailey, Stevie Johnson offense, the Shady McCoy, Mike Gillislee offense, and the Josh Allen, Brian Daboll offense. As a 30-year-old Bills fan, these are the offenses that brought me the most joy as a Bills fan. So it was nice on Twitter seeing all the Mike Gillislee, LaShawn McCoy highlights, Richie Incognito, Eric Wood. That's the type of running game the Buffalo Bills are going to be bringing back to Buffalo, or at least in parts, possibly. Everyone adapts, times change. But Dave, I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts on bringing Aaron Cromer back as offensive line coach?
I mean, I think it's a great move, and for the reasons we talked about on the last show, right? We knew that Ken Dorsey was the OC and Joe Brady was elevated to or hired to be the quarterback's coach, and we know Ken Dorsey's background prior to OC was quarterback's coach and passing game coordinator. Cromer, on the other hand, fits the bill as more of that running game O-line presence, O-line coach presence, where we said, well, are the Bills going to go the Rauscher route with a guy who's inexperienced and maybe is an up-and-comer? And I had made the comment that I would prefer them with having Joe Brady and Dorsey in place to go for maybe a more experienced offensive line coach, with maybe the grass not being always greener with Bobby Johnson walking out the door. A lot of people had mixed feelings on him, but getting Aaron Cromer back in the building to me is a perfect complement to what you now have with your other coaches on this side of the ball. You have the up-and-comer Dorsey at coordinator. You have the humbling experience that Joe Brady's going to go through now, probably got that job as offensive coordinator with the Panthers maybe a little too early, and now is going to be kind of hungry, I think, to reprove himself as the quarterback's coach. And then to complement that, you bring in an experienced offensive line coach who has experience coordinating run games, which is something we had talked about. Where is that run game sort of coaching presence going to come from? Now we know it's going to come from Aaron Kromer, and one of the better offensive line coaches out there available. Did some nice things with the Rams, obviously prior to this past season. Got a lot out of Darrell Henderson, got a lot out of CJ Anderson, right? A couple years back. I mean, at the end of the season. So and obviously the times with McCoy here. So to me, it's a great hire. Maybe a name that we hadn't even considered because he wasn't actively coaching. But to me, I think it's a great hire to complement the room.
How about you, Kendall? What are your thoughts? And Daniel you guys told me not to mention this, but Daniel opened the door. He says, I'm really glad Cromer's back, but do not mess with that man's beach chairs. The charges were dropped, Daniel. Okay. So I don't know what you're talking about. The charges were dropped. And I'm sure that do you think that if I'm Aaron Kromer, I have a sense, I have a sense of humor about that shit. And I'm sitting on a beach chair in my office, at One Bills Drive. That would be
That's
me.
a good way to put it to bed early and just be like, all right, let's get the elephant out of the room.
CR comes in and says, why did he leave the Rams? That's a great question. His contract was up. He was not retained. There were some, at least to my vaguest of vague memories, there was some rumblings that, McVay just didn't want to hit reset on the run game. He didn't like what was happening, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, they had success. He had a lot of success with Todd Gurley and that running game in LA, doing really completely different stuff than he had done in his time in Buffalo. But Kendall, speak to this Aaron Kromer hire. How do you feel about the Bills adding Aaron Kromer to the coaching staff here?
Yeah, I really like it for a lot of the reasons that Dave was just talking about, where it's the contrast with the hires on the offensive side so far. We kind of have those up-and-comers, those guys that are really trying to prove themselves. It is nice to get that guy with experience in the room. And then also, like he said, the fact that this offense, or actually you said it, Judge, the offense was number 1 in the league in rushing while he was here. And then you go back and you look at all the running backs that were part of his offenses. And yeah, there are some good ones like Shady McCoy. Obviously, he definitely is responsible for a good majority of that success. But then you look at if Shady wasn't getting the ball, it was Gillislee. It was Carlos Williams. And where are those guys now? And it's not to say that those guys were bad running backs, but that does have something to be said about the alleys that they were running through and the scheme that they were running in. So I'm really excited to see how it's paired with this passing offense and this shotgun heavy offense. Does he want to get into 12 personnel, 11 personnel? Does he want to stay in shotgun? Are we going to see more boot action? I'm really interested to see how his hands on the running game impacts the passing game and vice versa.
Yeah, for sure. And we got Elijah G coming in and saying, I know we chatted about zone versus gap and a good coach can do both. I thought the Rams were a zone blocking offense, and that is pretty accurate. They ran mostly a wide zone. I'm going to get to that in a second, but here is an actual quote from Aaron Kromer after the 2019 season when he was being interviewed by the LARams.com. And he says, there's a lot of different styles out there, a lot of different schemes, but you really want to marry them to the talent that you have on the team. So it's nice to know that Aaron Kromer, at least in his words, isn't one of those guys who's like, I do this, this, and this, and this, and you're going to come in here and you're going to do everything I tell you to do, this, 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 and this. No, he's the kind of guy who, when the Buffalo Bills bring people in, if it's not working, he's going to adapt and he's going to adjust to the personnel that he has in front of him. And I think that is one of the things that sort of malleability is one of those things that you're going to need from a coach. In my notes here, Eric Turner, cover 1, he talked about physical brand of football. About how the guys for Aaron Kromer, the offensive lineman, play a physical brand of football. They're well coached. He gets the most out of limited talent. The Rams didn't always have world beaters along that entire offensive line. The Buffalo Bills were doing things with guys like Jordan Mills at right tackle and John Miller at right guard. They were finding success in the running game with guys like that. here with Anthony Lynn and Greg Roman, it was very much, and Tyrod, it was very much shotgun, power running, power gap scheme type of guy here. Then he went to LA with Sean McVay and was very much under center, wide zone. Like in that same article, he talked about first and second down being under center a majority of the time, and how most teams in the NFL aren't under center on first and second down as much as the LA Rams were. So coming here, it's all about marrying those two things together, right? Being able to do both. I've talked at length on this show about how much I respect the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being able to go between 11 and 12 personnel, or even bring 3 tight ends out onto the football field, and one play be able to spread you out and the next play be able to run the ball down your throat. Mm-hmm. They are very flexible in what they can do on offense. And I think Aaron Kromer is going to bring the experience here to help the Bills be versatile in that. And then, last but not least, Eric Wood called him. Eric Wood stamp of approval. Yeah. Randy Hartman said in the comment section, Eric Wood called him the best run game designer he's ever worked with on Twitter. So he's going to come in here. He's going to be the de facto, I think he's going to be the de facto running game coordinator, even if he doesn't get the title.
Yeah.
Because he's clearly the most experienced guy when it comes to planning a run game. Joe Brady, very much a quarterback, receiver-centric guy. Same with Ken Dorsey. And now Dorsey's got that sounding board. He's got Joe Brady, who's called plays before. He's got Aaron Kromer. I don't think he called plays in Chicago, but he was the OC. And he's got some guys who have been there, and they have done that. So that should be super interesting. We're going to have Russ Brown from the Cover One Draft podcast joining us any moment now, anytime in the next couple of minutes. And we're going to walk through the Senior Bowl position by position. We're going to talk about guys who had big weeks and guys who we think fit the mold of the Buffalo Bills. But before we do, while we're waiting on Russ, Kendall, talk to the people a little bit about what you've been up to, some of the work you've been doing for SIS, and how pumped you are for this offseason for the Buffalo Bills, man.
So this past year for SIS, I was charting a bunch of games for them, whether that's, just looking at offense, defense, special teams, participation. And I got to scout a bunch of players with the resources that they had. Their scouting book is no longer a book for this year. They're turning it digital. So that book that you guys were referring to last year, that's going to be online. And I think it comes out like mid to late March, and I'll have, I think I had some guys actually not declare for the draft. So like 10 to 15 scouting reports in that. And not all of them are great. Some of them are. But I'm happy to have the chance to really, really get into the tape with those guys. And then since getting here to Cover One, no lack of resources there either. I've just been hopped right back into the tape. And yeah, being able to watch the Senior Bowl and get more all 22 tape for college film has been great. Specifically, I know Russ is high on Ahmad Gardner, and it's funny because Cincinnati was one of my participation teams. I've seen people talk about Sky Moore a lot. Western Michigan was one of my participation teams. So those were a couple teams I'm super, super familiar with, and I know a lot of the guys on those teams. But other than that, a lot of college football I'm very blind to it, and I literally need the all 22 tape, or else I will be blind going into the draft.
Good point here from By Chance, going back to Kromer for a second. I was going to bring this up because I saw a couple people on Twitter mention it.
Yeah.
Could Cody Ford reclamation project be underway with a guy like Aaron Kromer coming to Buffalo? Like I said, he's worked with John Millers of the world. He's worked with the Jordan Millses of the world. He has done some things. Like I've gone back and I was looking at Cody Ford scouting reports coming out. And I went back and read a couple of Matthew Fairburn articles from when Cody Ford was drafted, and just some of the comments that Brandon Beane had about Cody Ford. It's easy to say they're going to cut him loose, right? And not even bring him to training camp and save the $1.6 million or whatever it is and take the $400K or so cap hit and just call it a day. But it's not the craziest cap hit of the world. It's the final year of Cody Ford's contract. Could you see a world, Dave, where the Buffalo Bills give Cody Ford another shot at training camp?
Considering it's the last year in his contract, we hear the talks about guys playing up in their contract years. We saw with Jordan Phillips when he came here and parlayed that good season into a good contract for himself. Shaq Lawson, his final year, same kind of deal. There's something to be said about that phenomenon of guys in contract years. Now, maybe it's a fresh start for both, right? Aaron Cromer back, spent a little time away from the game. Cody Ford with a fresh voice in his ear. At this point, I think we are in a decent spot as fans and as of people who talk about the team to say there's really no downside, I don't think, to keeping Cody Ford for this last year to see what you can get out of him, because he's either going to continue to not play well and you're going to be done with him at the end of the year, wipe your hands clean, or if he does turn it around and he does make some sort of crazy 180, well, then you have the benefit of potentially having him for another run this year, whether that's him as a starter or at least as your primary backup guard. You would have a position that's somewhat settled for a run window in 2022. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be back in 2023 if he plays decently this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying for this year, for 2022, and this run, the Bills could go on again like they have the last 2 years. If he does prove to be serviceable, that's not a bad thing for the Bills.
All right. So I just went back and double checked my messages with Russ. And so I've been doing this thing lately where I've been texting people the number 15, but my fat fingers have been clicking the 2 instead of the 1. So he will be joining us at 9:25.
Okay.
So we got a couple of minutes to kill here. And before we get into the Senior Bowl, I got myself a Jabroni of the week.
Jabroni, you are 3 seconds away. And the Rock means 3 seconds away from the Rock to lay the smackdown on your candy ass.
I can't stop you though. You keep using this word jabroni, and it's awesome.
All right. So I don't know if you guys have any jabronis that you want to throw out this week, maybe some Pro Bowl related jabronis.
I have one.
Mac Jones maybe at the Pro Bowl, but I'm going with the Houston Texans as my jabroni of the week. The way that Jack Easterby and Cal McNair are running that franchise, part of me thinks that it's a cult. It's no longer an NFL franchise. It's just a cult. I'm waiting for them to turn their stadium into some kind of compound where the players aren't allowed to come or go as they please. They have to stay there, probably make their own food, plant their own, gardens, everything like that. It's turning into an absolute cult there in Houston with Nick Caserio on the headset. They were down after firing David Coley and owing David Coley $22 million. They were down to Josh McCown, Brian Flores, and John Gannon. Now, apparently, Josh McCown didn't get the job after the Brian Flores lawsuit for obvious reasons. Brian Flores didn't get the job because he named David Culley in his lawsuit. The Houston Texans soured on on Brian Flores because of that. So then they went to John Gannon, and apparently Easterby and Nick Caserio couldn't come to a compromise on John Gannon. So they turned to Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith, whose 2021 defense ranked 31st in yards allowed, 31st in rushing yards, and 27th in scoring. He was 8-24 in his last NFL stint in Tampa Bay. He was 17-39 at the University of Illinois, and he is 63 years old. My issue isn't so much with Lovie Smith. All right. So I'm not going to get into does he deserve it? Does he? Clearly he's a qualified candidate. He knows how to run an NFL franchise, etc. It's whatever. My issue is that franchise is so inept and we don't play them next year. That is my issue. But guess who does? A ton of our common opponents. The Colts play them twice a year. The Titans play them twice a year. The Browns, the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Broncos, the Raiders, and the Dolphins. To play the Jets
twice a year, so it's like
I want the Texans. The Texans should be on everyone's should be on everyone in the AFC. They should just only play every AFC team next year. They should play one game against every AFC team. Colts shouldn't get 2 free wins. Titans shouldn't get 2 free wins. The Browns, Chargers, Chiefs, Broncos, Raiders, Dolphins, they shouldn't get free wins. I'm mad that we're not playing the Texans next year because I would absolutely love to curb stomp that joke of a franchise again. That's why they're my Jabroni of the week, not because of the hire of Lovie Smith, just because we don't get to play them next year. That's why they're my Jabronis. So maybe it's the NFL schedule makers.
I was just going to say.
Maybe it's the NFL schedule makers. What do you think, Dave? Who's your Jabroni of the week here?
Well, it's a very recent Jabroni of the week, and it's more just it's a minor thing, but Ian Rappaport, the way he kind of like talked down or made that snide comment about Cromer's daughter breaking the news about the hire, how he was like, "What's your source?" in parentheses, like, "It's confirmed, great hire." Like, bro, like, it's his daughter. Like,
Just give it to her.
I took that as like Ian Rappaport making a joke.
I took it as a joke. I know,
but he's also Darren. He's also Darren Ravel, like, where he also could have been dead ass serious.
No. It was clearly like, at least I read it and I was like, okay, he's joking, but like, why are you being like? It was kind of like a backhanded sort of like
exactly
dig at her, like, in a way. Like, I know it was intended to be a joke, but it's like, you don't need to say that, man. Like,
exactly.
All I'm saying is, when I made our air raid hour graphic, I made sure to put her on the graphic, Brooke Cromer, and I tagged her, and she liked it, so you know she approves of the graphic that I made.
It's more about, like, I guess my general feeling about these guys, these media guys, right? Like Schefter and them, like they clearly don't like it when, like, someone, quote, below them breaks news, right? Like, if Schefter, like, maybe not Schefter, but some of these other guys like Rappaport and others are clearly, like, insecure about, like, the fact when they don't break big news. And the fact of the matter is Rappaport has broken news before that hasn't been true, right? So like, there's some
Antonio Brown was never a Bill.
There's some.
That's the one I think of too.
La Canfora is another one like that, right? There's some.
Started on La Canfora.
There's some, like, complex going on with some of these guys. I shouldn't lump Schefter into that, because Schefter's usually actually pretty damn on the money. But guys like La Canfora and Rappaport, like, you can tell there's something inside of them that they don't like it when, like, mid-tier people break news, and it's just so annoying.
Yeah, it's to La Canfora. Like, I don't even think he works for CBS Sports anymore.
Florio's even worse, I think.
Oh God.
But he doesn't really break news so much. He just talks.
Creates clickbait.
Yeah. Oh, his tweets, the headlines are just brutal. But Jason La Canfora, clearly, like, Doug Whaley just vented to Jason La Canfora back when Rex Ryan was the head coach, and Doug Whaley was like, this fucking organization is a shit show. So Doug Whaley would just literally call, I think, Jason La Canfora on a daily basis and just, bitch and moan. I think he thought Jason La Canfora was his therapist, and then Jason La Canfora would go and just tweet it all, saying it was from an anonymous source. So I feel like almost that, like, La Canfora, like, worked his way up to credibility because of Doug Whaley. So I kind of resent Doug Whaley a little bit for that. But then once Doug Whaley got the can, Jason La Canfora just literally makes shit up. Like, he is no better than, like, some of these, like, NFL rumors, Twitter handles. Like, he literally has no sources. He just makes shit up, and it's hilarious when people, like, retweet it and take it as fact. It's pretty funny. All right, so within the next minute or two, Rush should be here. So Dave, you had a chance to watch the Senior Bowl. You watched it on tape delay. I told you to prepare yourself.
I'm so glad I did, honestly, because you know what? I got to fast forward. I didn't have to sit through commercials and watch through that snooze fest. But I will say this: watching the broadcast game, right? I haven't gotten into the all 22 like Kendall has, but watching the broadcast game, it was very evident to me that this presentation of the broadcast, they were trying to make it all about the offense, and they really didn't talk a ton about some of the good defensive play during the game. I felt like even guys making tackles and sacks, like you were listening to just try to see, like, were they going to mention the guy's name who got the tackle? And a lot of times on good tackles and good plays where the defense, did its job, they didn't really talk about the defense too much. But I will say my overall thoughts on the Senior Bowl from a what it's worth perspective is I think college football gets these games right, because the Senior Bowl, East-West Shrine game, like, they have clearly gotten to the point with these games where these games matter to the players almost more than the bowl games, because it can actually affect their stock in the draft, because it's literally the only time they get to play against competition that they probably haven't played against at all during the season, obviously, and a lot of times they do, but, like, you see guys like Rashad White going up against, guys from the Big Ten or whatever. So, like, that's not going to happen during the regular season. So I think that college football really does a good job in kind of selling this as like an NFL draft, sort of like another plug into the NFL draft. And these guys want to play well in these games because it gives them incentive and it can affect their draft stock. Right or wrong, that's what we're talking about, right? Which guys which guys rose, which guys fell. So from that reason, I really like these games, and I think that it makes them better than bowl games, honestly.
Yeah. The comment that I made was like they should just get rid of the senior in front of it and just make it a collegiate bowl game.
Yeah.
And they should invite some of the better juniors who might be interested in playing,
Or have another game.
Yeah, and they should hype it up the way that they do the Pro Bowl, and just get rid of the Pro Bowl and maybe move the Pro Bowl back to the week after the Super Bowl, turn it into a skills competition, move NFL honors. Like, you're having NFL honors the 4 days before the Super Bowl. Like, the Super Bowl teams can't even participate in NFL honors or anything like that. So why not to wait till the week after, where you can literally give the team the Lombardi on the stage, like at NFL honors and stuff like that, like after the MVP, and you can do a skills competition. Like, move all that shit to the week after and turn the Senior Bowl, maybe invite some juniors and build some buzz around that. But you were right with them underselling the defense. I think a lot of the reason why I think that game was so lackluster in terms of, like, big chunk plays and passing and scoring, they did, I think by the end of it, put up 30 points, was the defensive lines were just that good. And the DBs were just that good that it really, in that setting where you can't get uber creative and uber physical, like it just, I think, created an advantageous situation for the defense. So we're going to bring cover one draft expert Russell Brown into the show now. How you doing tonight, Russ?
I'm doing well, fellas. How are you guys?
Not too bad, man. We're just sitting here about to go through the Senior Bowl rosters with you, cover one draft analyst Russell Brown. We got Kendall here. So I'm just happy I can take a back seat today and listen to you guys talk about some prospects, learn some things. And I hope everyone in the comment section can learn some things too. And reminder, those of you in the comment section, if you got any questions as we're going through position by position and you want to hit us up, let us know. And we're going to start with the running backs this evening. Now, at the Senior Bowl, not all of these guys practiced. Some of them might not all these guys played. Some of them might not even have practiced, but you had Damien Pierce from Florida. You had Devontae Price from Florida International, Rashad White from Arizona State, Abram Smith from Baylor, Brian Robinson Jr. from Alabama, Jerome Ford from Cincinnati, Tyler Batty from Missouri, Zaquandre Wright from South Carolina, and TJ Pledger from Utah. Do we still have Russ there? Do we lose Russ?
I don't know. We got a little pinwheel going.
Yeah, I was about to ask him who he thought stood out this week in Mobile, but I guess, Kendall, I'm going to ask you, who stood out to you this week in Mobile in this running back group?
I feel like a lot of people will probably say Damien Pierce. I don't want to take that from him because I feel like that's probably what he's going to say. In terms of practice, I really felt like Jerome Ford had a really good week of practice. It's funny. Wow, good timing. He was just really well-rounded, and that's really what he showed all year at Cincinnati. He was just a really well-rounded running back, tough runner, had top speed to burn, shows that he can pass block a little bit and run some routes and catch out of the backfield. So I feel like he had an underrated week, especially because he didn't get to play in the game. But I'm sure Russ will now be able to talk about the probably most talked about running back at the Senior Bowl, which was Damien Pierce.
Yeah, we got you there, Russ.
Yeah, I think you guys have me now.
All right.
Yeah, I think we're good now. I don't know, sometimes StreamYard can get a little crazy on my end. But yeah, so talking about Damien Pierce, very good week for him. Somebody that came in, did a really good job as far as just a blocking perspective, really stuck his nose in there. Then just as a pass catcher, really impressed some people because when you watch him, you don't really expect a running back of his size to go down and really make some catches the way that he does at 220 pounds. But I thought he was really impressive. And I saw a question kind of pop up about Jerome Ford, also one of those guys that I think just runs downhill really well. And I think if they're looking for maybe just more of that complementary piece to Devin Singletary, because it kind of seems like here at the back or like the later part of the year, Singletary kind of took ownership of the backfield. So I think he would be a fine fit. He just had a daughter and stuff, which is why he wasn't able to take part of the Senior Bowl game and everything.
Wearing a Bills hat when he introduced his to his daughter, which I don't understand.
What is that?
But I don't know. I'm okay with it.
And maybe he did that.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah,
You
and,
might have
and
lost me.
maybe he did that because of just overall good meeting or something like that.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
Are you allowed to bring swag to the scene? I guess they all have agents and stuff now. You're allowed to bring swag and stuff. Looks like we might have lost Russ. By chance comes in and says, no running back stood out to me. The only running backs I like are juniors. And, we mentioned a little bit earlier about, or Russ mentioned a little bit about complementary backs to Devin Singletary.
Mm-hmm.
Kendall, I'm going to ask you, guys like Damien Pierce, guys like Jerome Ford, to me, they lack the burst that I want from a complimentary running back to Devin Singletary. I'm looking more in the mold of guys like Zaquandre Wright or Tyler Batty, or maybe even like a Devontae Price. What do you think is like a good complement to Devin Singletary? What do you think the Buffalo Bills should be looking for maybe in that 1B back? Because a guy like Damien Pierce, to me, and again, I could be underrating his burst, seems a little too similar to a guy we already have and probably will keep on the roster next year in Zach Moss.
I mean, yeah, these guys are pretty similar. The Jerome Fords, the Damien Pierce, they're similar to Zach Moss, but what have we gotten from Zach Moss lately? And that's what this league is about. At the end of the day, having two redundant skill sets behind your starter isn't necessarily a bad thing if, you still have your starter. One of them has to be a good complement. And I think Damien Pierce does play a very similar game to Zach Moss, but he just looks like he plays it with a bit more pop. Like, you use the word burst, like juice, all of that stuff. That's what you see when he runs. He gets downhill, and the business decision thing that Zach Moss said, we really didn't see it a whole lot until like a little bit into his career once he started to get rolling. It looks like Damien Pierce is going to do that like right once he puts that hat on for whatever team he's drafted to. He looks like he's all business all the time, and he's always trying to fight for every yard available. And I think that's really the compliment to Devin Singletary, a pass blocking running back that can also get the power runs done. Because Singletary can do that, but it's not necessarily his forte.
Yeah, and we got Charles G coming in talking about James Cook, who's very versatile. Randy's mentioning Breece Hall, who obviously wasn't at the Senior Bowl either. James Cook was supposed to be there. He backed out. I think his agent might be hearing some things, and I think James Cook could be going higher than some people expect, especially if he does well at the Combine. But Russ, I wanted to ask you specifically about Tyler Batty. Did he get a chance to practice at all? And what did you see from Tyler Batty out of Missouri if he did get a chance to practice?
Yeah, he did get a chance to practice. Nothing that I would say won anybody over as far as like winning the week or anything like that compared to guys like Pierce. But he certainly showed his elusiveness, really showed kind of that downhill running style, because you don't really expect that from a 5'7", 199-pound back. But he showcased that. And I think he could be somebody that fills in on third down, because I think he can catch passes out of the backfield. He's kind of got that one cut ability that you really like to see from those smaller and elusive backs. So maybe he's not necessarily the bruiser that Pierce would be, but I think Batty really showcased just that he can take, some of those physical hits, but again, just with that cutting ability, some of that explosiveness, it's really nice to see. And he was really productive this last season at Missouri. So I wouldn't be, opposed to that if I'm a Bills fan. If I'm looking for, a complimentary piece to my backfield, I think he would certainly fit to a Singletary and what the Bills are trying to do.
Dave, how about you? Anyone from Mobile stand out to you this week, whether it's in the game or what you saw in clips of practice?
Well, it's a guy that probably is on the other end of the spectrum, like not a ton of bursts, but got a lot of volume in this game, and that's Rachaad White from ASU. And I asked you about him, Steve, because I know you're out there in the desert. And what stood out to me in watching White, and this is kind of what stood out to me in watching some of the ASU games that I got a chance to go back and look at quickly, was that he's a really smooth runner. And although he didn't seem to have, he doesn't have that burst, it seemed like he, for a bigger guy, was a fairly smooth sort of one cut style of runner, which I thought was interesting. And I couldn't really tell. Maybe Russ could give us some intel on how he practiced, but he clearly got a lot of run in the game itself with 11 carries. He led that side in carries, and a couple, shorter runs down near the goal line, but ended up averaging close to 5 yards a carry in a game where the defenses really stood out. So Russ, Rachaad White kind of being talked about as a later round, maybe like a day 3 guy, but if he runs well, maybe at the Combine, could we see him starting to maybe sneak up boards a little bit?
He certainly could. You look back at last year's draft, 43% of players from the Senior Bowl ended up getting drafted in the 2021 NFL draft. I think you add White into that mix because, one, he's got the size. He's really patient as a runner. He checked in at 6 foot 210. And with that patience and that ability to kind of see things develop in front of him, especially with zone blocks and stuff like that, I think it can go a really long way. But as Jim Nagy kind of alluded to all fall, he said, White is one of the most smoothest, just a smooth operator as far as the running backs go. And he had like back-to-back runs during the team portion on the first day of practice where it was like he hit it and he was gone. And it was like, man, like you love to see that stuff. So I think it can go a really long way having a guy like that, and it can make a difference. So I would be okay with him, as well as part of the Bills' plans or really any team's plans. And I think he could definitely help his draft stock if he tests well, if he runs, and maybe in that 4 or 5 range or even a sub 4 or 5, it would go a really long way for him.
Yeah, and it's interesting with him because I think one of the things we saw with Zach Moss, at least like as we sort of watched him this year, is like the vision just didn't seem to be there for him in a lot of instances, which seems to be one of the strengths of a guy like White, coupled with that smoothness. You feel like he's going to get what's in front of him. He's not going to be inefficient, I would say, with his runs, even if he doesn't get a ton of yardage. He looks like the type of guy that will get what's blocked for him and maybe even a little more. So I'm going to be really interested to see how he runs at the combine for sure. So good to hear about that.
Yeah. And a guy like Rachaad White too. Again, I was just going back and there's 3 articles that Matthew Fairburn did with Brandon Beane before the 2019 draft that I think every Bills fan should read. I tweeted them out. One was about how they slot like their pro day visits and everything. And one of the interesting nuggets in there was everyone was enamored with N'Keal Harry the year that N'Keal Harry came out. Everyone's like, well, the Bills, Brandon Beane was at Arizona State's pro day. Brandon Beane was there. The Bills are in on N'Keal Harry, all these things. And the Bills very well could have been in on N'Keal Harry. But what Arizona State likes to do, seeing as the NFL owners meetings are in the Biltmore in downtown Phoenix, Arizona State likes to plan their pro day the day after the NFL owners meetings let up. So every GM and every head coach is literally in the city of Phoenix, 20 minutes down the road from ASU's campus when they have their pro day. So you can almost guarantee that Brandon Beane will have a chance to see him up close and personal again at the Arizona State Pro Day after the owners meeting. So that was a real interesting nugget from that Fairburn article from a couple of years ago. Again, I tweeted those out on our Air Raid Hour, the Bills Guys Twitter page. Check those out. They're must reads before every draft season, in my opinion. But Russ, you were on the ground in Mobile, wide receivers, talk of the town, guys like Calvin Austin, guys like Christian Watson were the real big ones. You can easily name one of those too, but who are some of the receivers that really stuck out to you in Mobile this week?
Well, starting at the top, right? I mean, you just kind of said him. Christian Watson, 6'4", 211, really good length, and he was by far the most consistent wide receiver through all 3 days of practice and even during the game. Teams are going to love his versatility. He can play in the backfield. You'll see him line up at running back, and that's kind of the hot thing right now with these receivers. You see Deebo Samuel doing it. You see, Cordero Patterson doing it. So people want to find that running back receiver kind of mix in today's NFL because there's so many versatile weapons that you need. And he can do kind of a little bit of everything. And I thought from a route running perspective, he had a really fluid lower body, really flexible, which you don't see from guys that are 6'4", and that type of size. You just see guys that kind of run straight, run vertical, can't really create separation and just win in jump ball situations. But he did a lot over the middle, and I thought he was really consistent in that area. Next, I'll go with Vilas Jones out of Tennessee. He'll be 25 in May, which will probably scare a lot of people. But in this offense with Buffalo, I would be all for it because really you have Gabriel Davis, you have Stephon Diggs, you have Dawson Knox. Whatever happens with Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders, that will sort out during free agency. But at the end of the day, like you don't need some young stud with Josh Allen. You just need somebody to run routes efficiently and catch the football. And Vilas Jones, man, was so shifty all week long, and he was winning with his speed vertically. I mean, he's 5'11", 203, which you like when I saw 203, I was like, man, I don't know if this guy's going to really be able to outrun defenders. And he did. And then, you look back, he's got a master's degree. He's been playing football for a long time. Back in 2016, 2017 was catching passes from Sam Darnold at USC, which is crazy.
Hmm.
So I like the fact that you could potentially get this guy in the 3rd, 4th, or maybe even the 5th round, to me is like, that's kind of like that Amon-Ra St. Brown. Everybody's like, let me find that guy that the Lions did. Well, this might be your guy. Might be older, but the skill set is there. And then you mentioned Calvin Austin. I mean, how can you not be excited about this 5'7", 173 player that just, you get the ball in his hands, he's going to make guys miss. Maybe not, grabbing 100 passes a year like some of these true number 1 receivers, but when you think of the speed, the difference makers, guys that can create separation because of their start-stop ability, he's got it. And when you look back at, and I'm not trying to bring up bad memories, but you pull up that AFC game against the Chiefs with Tyreek Hill, I mean, he creates separation and he's gone and off to the races. Calvin Austin's got that game-breaking type of speed. I mean, he's a track star, so I think those were the 3 receivers that stood out the most and probably could be the most realistic options because, Watson will probably be a top 50 pick, but Jones and Austin will probably be those, middle of day 2, early day 3 type guys that make a lot of sense.
Yeah, Calvin Austin stands at 5'7" and 3/8, 173 pounds. So obviously that's where the concern is there. But Kendall, I saw you were tweeting today that despite the fact that despite his diminutive stature, Calvin Austin really wasn't used in the slot all that much at Memphis. He was still used on the boundary a ton. Is that correct?
Yeah, I went through his games and I wanted to see his snap count at each game, and I'm pretty sure his max was like 6. I'm pretty sure he only hit that once, and then he hit 5 like maybe 3 times throughout the year. But when he's in the slot, he's good. He can operate out wide, at least in college, and in the slot. He proved to be very efficient in the slot. But yeah, he has that stop-start ability, like Russ said, where he can separate at the college level. Like, really his only issue is if people press him, can he keep his chest plate clean? And he proved that he could do that a few times on the outside just because of his shiftiness and kind of ability to move his chest plate quickly. But outside of that, that's going to be his biggest hurdle to being successful in the NFL, because I mean, some slot corners, you see like Teron Johnson, they're physical on the inside. They don't want to give you free releases on the inside for those quick slants. So you got to be able to beat press coverage at the next level. You don't see it as much in college. So that's my only concern with him. But everything that Russ said, like that's why you're drafting a guy like this for the Bills. It's that playmaking ability. It's what we're missing on offense, given that easy check down for Josh Allen and then letting that guy go out and make a play like Mac Jones had happen for him so often. Sometimes it's easier than it has to be schemed up to be.
And then Dave, I know you're a big fan of Romeo Doubs. He came out, had a couple of nice grabs in the Senior Bowl. What did you see from Romeo Doubs this week?
Well, kind of more of the same of sort of what I saw from the Nevada games that I watched. Good hands catcher, coming back, fighting for the ball for his quarterback. Nice blend of size and speed. And, obviously it's tough. It's tough in this game because not a lot of volume for the receivers, really, from any of the receivers in this game, given how the defense is played. But I mean, he did make the one nice catch early up the right sideline, which I thought was a nice play. And, I don't think this game hurt his stock at all, but I don't know that it necessarily raised his stock. I think it kind of kept him where he is, but I think if he has a good combine, you might see him creep up a bit. I did want to ask Russ about or Kendall one thing about Calvin Austin, and that's about, I see a lot of plays where he's running away from guys while he's on the move, right? What do you guys see on tape of him where he maybe has to settle down, stop, make a catch, and then kind of reset, make a guy miss when he's not on the move and get upfield? Like, that's really when I think of Tyreek Hill, what makes him so great, not only just his speed, but his ability to catch the ball and be at a dead stop and be able to then just burst left or right, make a guy miss in a short area. Like, does Calvin Austin have that ability, or is he more of a guy that needs to catch it while he's on the move to run away from guys?
Well, I'll start here because I'm already seeing comments popping up here. Tyreek Hill is a once-in-a-generational talent. I'm not saying that's his pro comparison by any means. I'm saying utilizing him in the same way. You have to understand, like, when your offense becomes one-dimensional, and I'm not saying that that's what you said here, Dave, but I'm
just asking because that's Tyreek, and Tyreek can do things that other guys can't do.
Right. But I'm, and from a usage standpoint, if you can use him in a similar way and it makes your offense better, you 100%, I think, go all in on a guy like that because it's about getting to the next step. But from a standpoint of watching his tape and what he can do, he can certainly, I think, start and stop. Maybe not as quick or be, having the same type of burst as somebody like a Tyreek Hill. But again, when you have a guy like that matched up in man coverage against a safety that runs a 4-5-5 or a nickel corner or something like that, that's just not going to do anything, then I think, you're able to just have that guy run vertically down the field or run that, that crosser across the middle. And, whether there's a safety coming down, like let's say you got a buzz defender coming down and he's running across the middle and that buzz defender's right there. I still think if you have that ball in his hands, he's still able to make something happen. So, sure, not at the same level as Tyreek Hill, but still somebody that can be very efficient with the ball in his hands.
How similar is Austin to a guy who went early or fairly early last year, who similar stature, maybe not the same type of player, but a guy like Rondell Moore, who the Cardinals drafted last year, who had the big injury history, but obviously speed, playing the slot, had contributed in the return game. Are they similar at all? Because we're talking about Calvin Austin being like a third, maybe fourth rounder, but we see a guy like Rondell Moore go even earlier than that last year. And it seems like people are talking Austin up more than we were even ever talking about Rondell Moore last year.
Well, and I think it's more so right now because, the Senior Bowl's fresh. You see these guys and, outside of Christian Watson and maybe Vilas Jones, there really wasn't much else at the wide receiver position. But when you look at the wide receiver position as a whole, I mean, you're still talking easily 6 or 7, maybe even 8 guys in front of him. I mean, that includes Jahan Dotson, whose name's popping up in the chat, David Bell, Jameson Williams, the Ohio State guys, Burks, Drake London. I mean, you got plenty of guys in front of him. Yeah. I mean, you've even got potentially John Mechie. So there's quite a few different guys here, but I think with Calvin Austin, could you compare him to Rondell Moore? Sure, in a certain degree. But I just think when you look at the track speed, I think there's a legitimate chance this guy can run a sub 4.3. And when he runs that sub 4.3, you're going to be like, oh yeah, maybe Tyreek Hill from a straight line perspective. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm like watching him up close and personal than rewatching the practice tape. I would be very, very excited to try to get my hands on him and putting him in my offense.
Before we get to tight ends, I do want to ask you about Khalil Shakir out of Boise State. He's one of my guys. And I think a lot of reason why I think a lot of people on Bills Mafia Twitter, Bills social media aren't high on Khalil Shakir is he's not a 4.3 guy or a 4.4 guy. He's probably going to clock in the 4.5s. But to me, I mean, this guy has some of the strongest hands in the draft. You talk about a guy who doesn't need to catch it with his body. He can catch it with his hands. That's what a guy like Khalil Shakir can do. His catch radius is insane. And just his short area burst and his short area quickness coming out of his routes. I think a guy like Khalil Shakir could end up being this year's like Amon-Ra St. Brown, a type of slot kind of guy who can go in the 3rd to 5th round and really surprise some people. What kind of week did Shakir have? Because outside of a couple of clips that were like oohing and on and his short area quickness in the red zone, I didn't see too much from Shakir.
Yeah, no, and I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there, comparing him to like Amon-Ra St. Brown, like could be very comparable from the measurables. He checked in at 6 foot 193. St. Brown was 5'11 and a half, 197. So they're going to probably be pretty close when it comes up to like height, weight, and speed overall like that. So I think with Shakir though, and that's a good point. He's a all around complete receiver, not going to be this elite speedster, not going to be maybe this elite route runner, but he's a very good route runner. And I think that's the thing. Like he didn't have these crazy wow plays, but he was just consistent. And maybe just people didn't get around to clipping the plays up, including myself. But he had a couple of plays where like he would run, that out route, sometimes like a dig, but he'd run something like closer to the end zone when they kind of had these 7-on-7s to the end zone. And he did a really good job just completing the process and making those catches and kind of bailing the quarterbacks that would have kind of those off throws every now and again. And he would really bail them out when he'd get those opportunities. But his release package looked relatively clean. Like there wasn't any false steps in anything. Like there were times that you would see like, Isaiah Likely, the tight end. Granted, we're talking a tight end compared to a receiver, but you'd watch Likely run his route and he's stepping back rather than stepping forward. And, with Shakir, he's aggressive, he's attacking downhill, and you like to see those types of release packages. So one of those guys that probably will slip under the radar, could fall into that 3rd, 4th round. and very well become, a very consistent contributor throughout his career, especially early on as a rookie.
Yeah, let's transition now to tight ends. Obviously, the talk of Mobile was Trey McBride. I think coming in, he's probably going to be the first tight end off the board. And you can speak to Trey McBride. Some other names I heard this week. Greg Dulcich, my guy from UCLA, is a name that I heard. Jake Ferguson really popped in the game. What were your thoughts on the tight end class in Mobile, and who are some guys that stood out?
But yeah, it's a really deep group of tight ends in general, especially at the Senior Bowl. Trey McBride is my top tight end, and I mean that's probably just a luxury if you wanted to select him, and that's maybe just really going off your board of what you really need, which is from cornerback to potentially another receiver and players like that. But no, I mean, Jake Ferguson was really consistent throughout the week, had it in the game. I mean, did a lot of stuff underneath, was able to run after the catch, and more so comparable to like a Drew Sample from what we saw a couple years ago. Maybe not as good of a blocker and not elite in any one key area, but just pretty consistent. And when you can get a guy like that, if he can carve out 5 to 6, maybe even 7 or 8 years of a career as a backup tight end, that matters, because when you're running 12 personnel or something like that, and you need those multiple tight ends, it makes a lot of sense to have a guy like that. Charlie Kohler didn't necessarily have a bad week. Didn't have.
He got abused by Deangelo Malone on that one sack.
Malone had a good week though.
I talked him up. I was just gonna say, but anyway.
Yeah, no, Malone was surprisingly powerful for a player that didn't have like the height and weight that everybody else has. But yeah, aside from that, I'm still very much in on Charlie Kohler because I like his frame. Checking in at 6'6", 256 reminds me a little bit of Kyle Rudolph, like a poor man's version. Does a good job catching the ball away from his frame. And again, he's got that big body, so he's able to really just box guys out and do things that other tight ends can't do, because not every tight end is 6'6". But you mentioned Grant Dulcich, and I think he did a really good job just providing the ability of being a vertical threat, but also just being underneath. He was constantly open in those check down scenarios. And when you think about, like Josh Allen, for example, he's going through his reads and he's maybe got those high-low concepts to his left side or something like deep down the field, and nothing's open. And Dulcich right there, if he's wide open, he's going to make yards after the catch. And that's the type of playmaker he is, because he's that good of an athlete at 6'3", 248. So I think Dulcich would be a fine fit, and he was just really consistent and really proved his worth. So I like the tight end class overall. Maybe not their biggest need, but when you get into pick 89, pick 128, if you're able to make your team better, especially offensively, I think you go for that.
And someone in the comment section just a little while said we don't need a tight end. I disagree. I mean, Tommy Sweeney was inactive for every game down the stretch. We were starting one tight end.
Yeah, let's not forget Tommy Doyle took his job.
An offensive tackle. So, I mean, this is a football team where, again, I really admire what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are able to do. I mean, they can spread you out, go 4 wide receivers, and the next play bring in 3 tight ends. Exactly. And they are so versatile in what they can do and the personnel that they can put on the football field and be effective. The Buffalo Bills tried to roll out 2 tight ends earlier on in the season when the offensive line wasn't doing so hot, and there really wasn't much pop to their offense. Why? Because Tommy Sweeney is like a replacement level tight end, and the offense just didn't flow, not because of the package, but because of the players in the package, in my opinion. So I think the Buffalo Bills could upgrade a tight end. So guys like Jake Ferguson, guys like Charlie Kohler, guys like Jeremy Ruckert, Greg Dulcich, or Trey Berry, these guys are all guys who could be on the Buffalo Bills radar. Even, I mean, we're not going to get into
Don't leave out my guy, Daniel Bellinger, man.
And that's the last name I wanted to bring up. Daniel Ballinger. I mean, this is a dude, 6'4", 250 pounds. I mean, he played at I watched a couple of he measured at the Senior Bowl at 6'4" and 1/4. So they were lying a little bit, or he was wearing some stilettos at that San Diego
slippers when he got measured.
But I mean, this guy who he's chalked up, like he's a built dude at 6'4", 250 pounds. He's got 10-inch hands, 77, almost 78-inch wingspan. So I mean, he is a big dude. Watching some San Diego State games this year, being out on the West Coast, their quarterback play was effing terrible. Yeah. Talk about the week that Daniel Ballinger had with maybe some actual quarterbacks throwing him the football.
Well, I mean, I don't think he had the best of weeks. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble here, but that's just the truth. There was times, like from a blocking perspective, and I might have even put it out there, but he got like blown up into his team, like that was like in the line behind him.
Oh boy.
And it was like a
Right to my heart.
competition. Yeah, it was a competition thing. I'm trying to remember who the player was that blew him up, but they just got after it. And like there was just times that he didn't look the player that you saw at San Diego State. But, you know, there were a couple catches down in the red zone during 7-on-7 that he did okay. You know, the ball was poorly placed and he used his length to make the catch and kind of box out a linebacker or a safety that was down there. So that was fine. But overall, I mean, you're talking day 3 somewhere, more than likely, because I don't know if he's going to necessarily test like, you know, Isaiah Likely or even, you know, Cole Turner or something like that. Some of those other tight ends. I don't know exactly how he's going to test. So if the testing doesn't go well, I have a hard time believing that he would get beyond day 3. But again, if you think that's an upgrade over Tommy Doyle and like Tommy Sweeney, then by all means, go ahead and take that guy, because if that's what you need, then, you know, I could trust Josh Allen in this offense to make it work.
Oh yeah, don't you worry. We scout all 7 rounds here. So when we ask you about Daniel Bellinger, we're not asking you because we want to use a 4th round pick on him.
Oh, that's fine.
We're looking 6-7 with a guy like Daniel Bellinger. But speaking of offense and speaking of, you know, the big uglies up there getting into the lines now, offensive line. I saw you posting things about Andrew Stuber this week, maybe doing some work for your Detroit Lions. He played a lot of guard this week. He might have played only guard. What were some linemen like Stuber and stuff? What linemen stood out to you this week? Offensive linemen, maybe keep it on the interior for the Buffalo Bills here that stuck out to you this week in Mobile.
Yeah, well, buckle up because offensive line play is my thing. So, starting with Stuber, I mean, he didn't just play primarily guard. He tried a little center, didn't get really the snaps great, but again, he's never really played center. I mean, he's primarily a right tackle at Michigan, played a little right guard, but I thought he did well. He was my honorable mention as far as offensive line goes. He checked in at 6'6", 327, had actually better length than I expected him to have, because when you watch him on tape, you're like, okay, he doesn't look that long, probably going to move inside to guard, but I think he could actually hold his own. And he, really just was stout against those defenders as far as, you think of like a stout run defender. He was kind of like just stout, anchoring, holding his own, really good core strength. But there was times, he'd lose a rep or two getting blown off the ball. But, I like where his hands are on the chest plates of defenders. He's constantly square. And, there were times that he played with a little bit too much forward lean, but I think you can clean that stuff up. And as you get later into the draft, if he ends up becoming available, you could potentially look at developing him at right guard or left guard with maybe even some swing tackle ability. Next, I'll say Ed Ingram out of LSU. He won Offensive Lineman of the Week for his team, that wasn't, Trevor Penning or Zion Johnson or anything like that. But he looked really good. I mean, 6'3", 317, really quick feet, could play a little guard, could play a little center. He struggled at times during the actual game, but in practice, I mean, there was just times where his base was square. He wasn't too wide. You think of like Cole Strange from Tennessee Chattanooga, and really good, snap to step quickness that he has. But there was times where he was just like way too wide within his base, where Ingram was mirroring defenders and just really doing a good job overall. So I think at one of those guard spots, you could take a chance on him. Zion Johnson starting at the very top, Mr. Consistent. I mean, how can you not be excited about a 6'2", 314-pound interior offensive lineman that tried his ass off at center all week long, staying after practice, and just a great kid, just a great kid overall. Will he be there, at 25? Maybe. Are you kind of rolling the dice there? I'd be for it if I'm a Bills fan. If I can get my hands on him, absolutely. After that, I mean, I'll talk briefly about Trevor Penning. He probably wouldn't be somebody the Bills would take. But again, you see the aggressiveness, 6'6", 330. If he ends up being there, you have to be really excited about him. Next, I'll go through. I got three more for you. I'll go through three more. Starting with Luke Goteky from Central Michigan, one of the more consistent right tackles I think in this class. His tape against Missouri is really good when you look for like that most consistent tape. Just constantly putting his hands in his holster, shooting onto the chest plates of defenders. He didn't practice after the first practice. He actually ended up getting hurt. I didn't find out why, but he's 6'4", 318. I think he could play guard or right tackle at the next level. And I was hoping that he would be able to play through the entire week, but that wasn't the case. But after that, Luke Fortner from Kentucky, I thought did a really good job at 6'3", 302, playing a little bit of center, really aggressive at times, but there was times that he would like overset or false step, and it didn't really work out for him. But I think as a center, he could probably make it work. And then just lastly, Dylan Parham from Memphis, 6'2", 313, needs to get stronger. Former tight end. I mean, he was recruited as a tight end, but there was times that he would anchor really late. Which is fine. But, if you're getting blown back into your quarterback, it might be a problem at center. But overall, like his skill set, I like the ability of him to move, the way he pulls and gets out in space. So I think he's an athletic interior offensive lineman that would be very interesting for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, no, my question
There's
for
a
you
lot
is this.
there.
Yeah, no. My question for you is like, is there anyone who just looked bad? Like just not good? Is there anyone that like embarrassed, like anyone who stocked down this week? Because that's the one thing you don't hear about the Senior Bowl. I think really, I don't know if it's people trying to, be nice or whatever, but you don't really see like, oh, this guy freaking sucked this week. Like, is there any guy who just had an awful week in Mobile that maybe should be off our radar or someone we should be concerned about?
Max Mitchell from Louisiana Lafayette. I wouldn't really take a bunch of time. Could he get drafted? Sure. But I wouldn't spend a bunch of time. There was times that his base would get really wide, really just way too like flat-footed, almost like on his heels, slipping around a little bit. And it could have been because, wet turf, whatever, but just not great. And then the kid from Fordham, his first name's Nicholas. I'm not even going to try his last name.
But
he didn't have a good week at all. I mean, just no strength whatsoever. But I will give this little nugget away from kind of the bad guys, more so to just one of my favorite players in the draft. And that's Lucita Smith from Virginia Tech, 6'3", 321. Really just a powerful guard. Maybe not necessarily somebody that you would want in zone, probably more so in gap scheme and those gap blocks and things like that. But he's aggressive, man. He's a mean dude, super nice dude in person, but on the field, he's a mean cuss. But he told me specifically that the Buffalo Bills meeting that he had, he felt went really well. He felt like they did a lot of homework on him. And he was prepared, but at the same time, he was kind of caught off guard from some of the information that they knew. So he was happy to know that they were doing their research, but he might be somebody, as you look back at the Wyatt Tellers of the Virginia Tech kind of chain, they might go back there and grab Lucita Smith.
And Kendall, I want to talk to you a little bit about Lucita because we got Dean Kindig coming on the show on Thursday. We're going to walk through the draft board with Dean, talk about guys that the Bills may have been interested in, scouting, etc. Talk about where Brandon Beane has been this past football season in terms of scouting. But Lucita Smith is a guy I know that you and Eric and Anthony broke down in the film room. My concern with Lucita, you see a guy like Brandon Beane last year talk about Greg Rousseau's long arms is the reason why he drafted Gregory Rousseau. And you got a guy like Lucita Smith with short arms. So what's your concern level with Lucita Smith physically? I'm looking up at his arm length here, 32 and 1/8 inch arms. Are you concerned about that arm length for Lucita Smith? And does it show up? Does it show up in practice?
It definitely shows up, and I think it shows up most in pass protection, where he doesn't have the length to get his hands on the defender first, and it kind of forces him to anchor later than he should. But the reason it doesn't worry me so much is because he plays with such great balance, body control, and just such a strong lower half that he can kind of make up for that and anchor without the longest of arms. It's definitely a concern. It's definitely a weakness, but I don't think it's something that should take him off boards or anything like that. It's just, every player's got their weakness that they have to overcome and find the strengths to overcome those. But I actually wanted to ask Russ about Marquise Hayes, because I watched him in one-on-ones and felt like he struggled a lot in one-on-ones. Obviously, O-line one-on-ones are tough for O-linemen, but I felt like he did well in the game. So I'm just kind of curious about what you thought about his week.
Yeah, well, he shedded close to 25 pounds for this event. He was pretty close. He was pretty close to like 340 pounds throughout the year. He checked in at 318 pounds. So I think it's more so just in those one-on-ones, you're lining up against Travis Jones, who's a thick 326, and you're trying to figure out how to really figure out that playing weight. And I think that's the key. But when you watch him on tape, you look back at Oklahoma. I mean, this dude, like, I don't know if anybody's wrestling fans here, people in the chat might be, but if like you think of like somebody that's just like putting his body on the line, running off the stage through a table or something. Like that's that type of guy, man. Like he will put his body on the line and he just bangs like in the box. He will get after it. And I'm a big fan of him just because I think you need guys like that are kind of relentless and physical. He's going to lose at times with leverage. He's not going to always, shoot his hands properly on the chest plate. He's going to get crazy, get wide. His footwork's going to get mixed up. But, if you're going to sit there and say, hey, I'm going to take Daniel Falele out of Minnesota because he's 6'8", 389, there's no reason why, you couldn't take Marquise Hayes, because some of the same issues that they have is they struggle with some of the inside counter moves. And then they just play with that forward lunge, that forward lean too much. And they're relying on that rather than sitting and squatting down and trying to roll their hips and anchor in those one-on-one situations. So I'm still very much a fan of Hayes, but yeah, go ahead.
It's just funny because you literally just described how long arms can actually be a weakness after we just talked about Lucita Smith's short arms being his weakness. You got to learn how to play with the arms you're born with.
And one of the things that I like about both Marquise Hayes and Lucita Smith here is these are guys that if the Buffalo Bills decide to go IDL early or decide to go edge early, decide to go corner early, like Lucita Smith to me is a third, fourth rounder. Marquise Hayes is somewhere between, the fourth and probably the sixth round. I think TDN is a little low on him. They got him as like a seventh round pick. I think that's a little low. But these are guys who could be had in the middle to late rounds of the draft. And the Buffalo Bills now have an offensive line coach in Aaron Kromer, who we've seen had success with John Millers of the world, with the Jordan Millses of the world. He didn't exactly have a ton of world beaters when he was at the Rams. They had some very good offensive linemen. They also had some plug and play guys. So I think bringing in an experienced offensive line coach in Aaron Kromer, at least to me as a fan, gives me a little bit more reassurance if the Buffalo Bills decide not to jump at the Zions of the world, but to go with the Ball Clays or the guys who are a little bit less refined, and guys like Lucita Smith or I almost called him Quentin Spain, but he's not Quentin Spain. He is he is Marquise Hayes. Eric Turner made that comp, and Eric Turner doesn't like to make comps, and he blurted it out. And I'm like, it's not getting out of my head now. It's not getting out of my head. Sorry. I know you don't like comps, but you're stuck with that one, Eric. All right, let's get to edge. And Dave, I want you to speak a little bit about Deangelo Malone, and then I want you to kick it to Russ, because that speed to power was absolutely incredible to see this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, I talked about Deangelo Malone on our last show as a guy that on the surface, right, on paper, does not seem like he would be a fit for the Bills, right? I mean, you talk about the production he had in Western Kentucky. I think just under 60 tackles for loss in his career, like over 30 sacks in his career. He, to me, kind of reminds me of that Quincy Roche type from last year. That's more of that sort of, when you look at him, you'd say, okay, he's like a 3-4 outside linebacker, but the Bills obviously need someone, in my opinion, who's a little bit more bendy, who's a little bit more of a pure pass rusher now with probably Jerry Hughes gone. And we know he's more on the smaller side, more of a bendy guy playing at like 250, 255 for his whole career. So a guy like Deangelo Malone is intriguing to me, even though on the surface he may not look like a fit for the Bills. If I'm looking for a more of a pure pass rushing type of guy to complement a guy like Rousseau that you drafted last year, and you've got AJ Epinesa, who really is more of like, in my opinion, more of like the Shaq Lawson mold, right? Where he's like he has some pass rush pop, but he's more of an edge setter and more of a guy that's kind of like a mid-range type defensive end. A guy like Malone really intrigues me. So it was nice to see him get that sack in the game, teaming up on the sack in that game. But Russ, like, am I crazy here to think like Malone maybe should be someone that could be looked at as a 4-3 end, or maybe even something like to that, where the Bills would consider looking at a guy like that?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, a little bit undersized because, he's 234 pounds. That's what he's listed as. So that kind of scares you a little bit. Can he hold his own in the run game? But, when you get into those second and long situations, or just second down passing situations, third down and long, those types of passing situations, you want to bring this guy in to just let him, pin his ears back and get after the quarterback. I'm all for that, because those guys have a place in this league. It's just about when they figure it out. And if a team is able to develop him properly from the get-go, obviously we all know how that works out. It works out pretty well. So I'm all for it, because this guy has the length. He's got the explosiveness because he's got a good get off. And then you mentioned, speed to power, and he was able to show that during the week of practice. So I'm for Deangelo Malone. I liked him 2 years ago when I was watching him. Again, he was probably thinner then than he is now. I mean, he was probably 220, 225 pounds then. So he's probably at least put on 10 to 15 pounds. And I think in an NFL program, he can easily put on another 5 to 10, not really lose that speed, and just continue to get better. And with some of the edge rushers that are here in Buffalo, it would make a lot of sense. So I'm not against him, and I don't know if this is getting kicked over to me for other edge rushers, but I got a list of those too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I just want to say, because the Bills, like, we know it's been very well documented how heavy of a rotation they use on the defensive line. Now, maybe that changes with guys like Addison and Hughes likely out the door, but if you're employing that heavy of a rotation, you're telling me you can't find a spot or a down and distance to put this guy in the rotation?
Oh,
Like, that's what I'm saying.
With 13 seconds left in the game, maybe.
Oh God, don't even, man.
How dare
Anyway,
you.
go ahead, Russ. Tell us about some other.
Russ, specifically though, I want you to talk about a guy that you talked about a lot, Arnold Abachetti. I want you to talk a little bit about Majai Sanders and Boy Mafi. Some of those guys who might fit the Jerry Hughes mold more so than maybe like the Basham or Rousseau mold. Not the length and strength ends, but the bendy edge rushers. Abachetti, Sanders, Mafi. Who had the best week of those three, and what do you see from those guys?
I'll start with Boy Mafi, because that was the guy that I probably would have compared to Jerry Hughes after the week, just because he is flexible, has very similar as far as height, weight, speed type deal. Is probably going to jump out of the gym at the combine. He's projected to have a 40-inch vertical, but he's just got really good explosiveness off the line of scrimmage, understands how to dip his shoulder, drop his shoulder, which is something that we've seen Hughes do for the last decade. And he's, we mentioned with Malone, you want to pin your ears back, get after the quarterback, kind of the same deal with Mafi. So I like him whether he's standing up off the edge or with his hand in the dirt, because he's going to take that half-man responsibility and he's going to get after it. But then you move on to, Arnold Abachetti. I love his skill set. I think he's a first rounder, just simply because I think there's so much to work with, because he's such a natural pass rusher. He's got really good flexibility, long arms at 34 inches, and he moves. I mean, I like his motor, and I like the pass rush moves that you see from him. He's able to use that length and have a long arm. He's able to show a little bit of power, and then he's able to counter. He's just got to get faster as far as off the ball. Like, there are times that he's trying to time the snap, and he's not. If he can time those snaps, I think he's going to be an absolute terror off the edge. Now, I'm not saying like he's going to put up TJ Watt sack numbers, but I think he's going to be very productive at the next level. And he's somebody that, if you feel like we got to flirt around with this guy in the first round, very possible. And maybe he falls in the second round like a Harold Landry, very possible. But I like Arnold Abachetti a lot. Like, I couldn't stop watching his tape. Like, normally I'll watch 3 to 5 games on a player. I think I watched all of it. I just kept going and going and going. Then you see him at the Senior Bowl, and I'm just like, I love this dude. Like, he's phenomenal. Beyond that, I'll bring up another one that you didn't mention there, but Kingsley Enegbar from South Carolina, 6'3", 261. You talk blend of power and speed, man. Like, there was times that he was long arming guys and using that speed and like translating it to power. But then, he had a very nice chop snatch move against, I want to say it was Trevor Penning. And he's impressive all around. Like, if his tape matches, he's probably going to shoot up my draft board immensely. And just,
he fits a Bills prototype, almost 6'4", 6'3.5", 6'3", 3 3/4, 261, 10-inch arms, 35-inch arms, 83 and 5/8 wingspan. Like that's a Bills prototype right there. He's the one who I think fits more of the style of defensive end the Buffalo Bills would be looking for. That's the kind of the conversation that we've had in Bills Mafia. Like, we all want the bendy edge, but the Bills seem to be moving towards those kind of guys. And that's why I was really sad that Cameron Thomas opted out. I really wanted to see Cameron Thomas from San Diego State. But I mean, speaking of these guys who maybe fit the Bills archetypes, no longer really in contention for pick 25, because he will likely be gone sooner. But talk about Jermaine Johnson a little bit.
Well, I mean, if you're a Bills fan and you're like worried about the division, I would be a little worried like he ends up falling to the Patriots or the Jets at 10. sounds rich, but it's very possible. And I mean, the dude is rocked up at 6'5", 259. Like, seeing him up on the field, like he's pretty yoked up, and he does. We talk about speed to power. The guy does a really good job translating it, and he understands how to use it at all times. And you saw him, win the battle against Kennard during that competition at the end of practice one day. He didn't end up winning the war. He lost 2 out of 3 reps, but he did have that big, impressive play. And those types of plays can make all the difference in the world if he catches an offensive tackle sleeping at the wheel, basically. So I think he's got a really good blend of pass rush moves. I think he could become more consistent in the run game, especially as far as keeping kind of his hips aligned, fighting pressure with pressure. There's times where I think he gets a little crazy, but you see that power in the run game. And there was times like backside pursuit, he just wasn't being touched. And it was like, I don't know how you block this guy, because you're going to have to send 2 guys and then you're going to let a linebacker run free. So I think it's a big benefit if you were able to get your hands on him. But the way it's looking, he's probably going to be a top 20 pick. And the team that I heard the most from, as far as, things up in my circle at the Senior Bowl, was the Philadelphia Eagles. Keep tabs on them and potentially them trying to package something to maybe moving up and getting them.
Dang, moving up and getting them with those 3 picks.
Yeah,
right
there's
there
so many picks.
Let's transition now to the interior. I think obviously the Taco Mobile, I think it started off as Travis Jones. I think Devontae Wyatt also popped. And then, Perrion Winfrey, who had a really good week, absolutely took over. Joe Marino called him the MVP of the Senior Bowl. I'm not actually sure who was named the MVP of the Senior Bowl, but Joe Marino thought it should have been Perrion Winfrey.
I think he did win it.
Did he win it?
He
deserved it, man. It was all over the place. Talk a little bit about what you noticed along the interior of the defensive line this week in Mobile. Who stuck out to you?
Well, starting with Winfrey, I mean, rightfully so, won the MVP, 6'3", 303, 35.5-inch arms. Really reminds me, and I mean, call me crazy, but kind of reminds me of like Nick Fairley in a sense. Maybe not 13th overall pick worthy, but you just see one of those guys with really good effort, good length, explosiveness, plays with a bit of, high pad level, but understands how to use his length and his arms. He's always following through with a rip move or, an arm over move. And you really like to see that type of stuff, but he was just very energetic. I mean, he was in the moment, just living it up, and you love to see that. Now, I don't know if he's going to be a first round pick. He could be, because I think the conversation is now you have Jordan Davis, you have DeMarvin Leal, who's kind of that second tier in the defensive tackle group. And I think Winfrey kind of put himself up there, as well as Devontae Wyatt, because on tape, Devontae Wyatt, I mean, just such a fluid lower body. You don't see that from guys that are 307. You just really don't. Normally those guys are probably playing nose, playing a zero shade, probably playing in those odd fronts. But I think he can do a variety of things, playing in those spots, playing as a 2-eye. I think either one of these guys can actually 2-gap. I think Winfrey does it pretty well. And then obviously Travis Jones, just with his size, I mean, looking at him at 326, it was like, man, this dude is massive, and he can 2-gap because he's got length, and he's somebody that, again, you can put in a variety of spots, and he was productive. There was times that he got stonewalled, don't get me wrong, like he lost to Zion Johnson, battled with Cole Strange at times, but there was also times that he was throwing guys out of the way and just getting back there. So those 3 guys for sure. And then just lastly, Fedarian Mathis, Alabama. One of the scouts I talked to on Tuesday morning actually gave really high praise of him and said, like, he's going to be a great interview, great leader. Don't be surprised if he goes a lot sooner than people think, because the grades we're hearing are actually really good. So I would believe that maybe there's a chance he ends up in the top 50, maybe top 65 or something like that, just because the character side of things, but also he's got good length as well. I mean, he's got almost 35-inch arms, and similar to Winfrey in a way, like understands how to use that length and can swim and do kind of a blend of everything. So I would be okay with any of those guys if you're trying to get, better on the interior, because I think, you're probably not going to get one of those first tier guys, but with those second tier and third tier guys, those 4 really jump out.
Looking at some of the deeper guys, I know someone here, Truck Reviewer wants to know about Kirk Heinisch from Notre Dame. I think he's a nose guard, played in, I think, the Hula Bowl. He got like a Hula Bowl invite. So he'd be like a UDFA type of camp body, like Justin Zimmer type of competition guy. But I'm looking at the, Otito Ogbina of UCLA, Neil Farrell Jr. from LSU, John Ridgway from Arkansas. These are all guys that I think could be drafted in the middle rounds who could be part of this Buffalo Bills rotation on the interior and fill a need. I mean, Obinia is 326. Farrell Jr. was 338, which I thought was crazy. That's a big boy right there. And then Ridgeway was 327. What are your thoughts on maybe, did any of those middle round guys stick out to you at all?
Neil Farrell for sure out of LSU. I mean, he kind of was more so a late addition to the Senior Bowl, I felt like, and he kind of came in under the radar and just had a great week. He really did. And I liked, his explosiveness, his burst upfield, and it felt like he had one of those motors that never quit either. So I would want to watch more of him. And I feel like when you see him, like you might think, okay, this guy's probably going to primarily play like as a nose or something like that. But it wouldn't surprise me if he carved out like a role just as that 2-eye right there in the middle of that A gap or something and just plugging it up. And you have a guy like Ed Oliver, next to him or something playing as a 3 technique. I think he could be very efficient. But, you mentioned John Ridgeway. He flashed quite a bit. And I didn't watch him like in depth. I did watch a lot of Arkansas tape over the summer because of, my interview with Grant Morgan and stuff like that. And I think Ridgeway was somebody that actually ate up a lot of stuff in the middle. So those guys from, Bumper Pool, Morgan and stuff, those guys could eat at the linebacker position and come downhill and flow and fit. And I think Ridgeway, though, just from what I saw in practice, there was times like where he would beat the offensive lineman off the ball and he would be just unblockable at times. So I think when you get into that, you're talking 5th, 6th round, these guys could really fit into that mix. And, maybe they don't start right away. Maybe they just are depth pieces, but I think those depth pieces are just as important as some of the starters that you have on the field defensively, especially when you want to talk about a rotation up front.
Mm-hmm. Kendall, anyone stick out to you in Mobile at defensive tackle? Anyone catch your eye?
I mean, the person that you brought up, Otito Ogbonnia, I really thought he surprised me. I thought he shot up my board particularly. I felt like there's not much to his game other than power, but really what are we looking for at this Bills front? We want someone to eat space. We want someone to be able to 2-gap, like Russ just said, so the linebackers can flow, play downhill, and not even just play instinctually, but they can then process the game faster because they can see what's happening in front of them so definitively. If someone's eating up that space like Otito Ogbonnia or Ridgeway or Farrell, it makes it so much easier for guys like Milano and Edmonds, especially in a nickel defense when we usually only have 6 in the box. It's going to be important to get one of those bigger guys. I'm definitely assuming the Bills are going to wait longer than we all want them to. So I'm looking at those 3 guys specifically. I think we all want the Jordan Davis consolation prize in Travis Jones, but I don't know if we're going to be spending that high on IDL.
I would be honestly content if the Buffalo Bills and I went on Twitter this week and said I'd be content with the Bills walking away from every UFA. So take this with a grain of salt, but if the Buffalo Bills were to re-sign Harrison Phillips and have Phillips and Oliver and then bring back Zimmer for camp and then go and draft, Neil Farrell in the 5th round and John Ridgeway in the 6th round. And they came into camp with Oliver, Phillips, Zimmer, Ridgeway, Farrell. Obviously Anku just re-signed today and you got Brandon Bryant. We came into camp with those 7 and just the best 4 wins. I'd be completely content with that because I think the Buffalo Bills need to go away from this archetype of 305-pound dudes. Yeah. Like Eric Turner was mentioning it. Like you need guys, you need 2-gappers. You need to free your linebackers to do other things. Russ just mentioned what John Ridgeway did for that Arkansas defense. Mm-hmm. He freed up other dudes to be their best selves on that defense. And too many times this season are Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano and Teron Johnson trying to make up for the lack of power up front and the lack of guys, filling gaps up front. So I would love to see that. The Buffalo, just take the biggest, fattest ones. Just take them all. all the fat ones. People on the show know how much I love the big old fatties, but slimming down a little bit as we get into the back 7 here. We got the linebackers. A ton of dudes flashed this week. Chad Muma had a big game. Damone Clark, Darian Beavers. Jenny Tyndall made a great play on special teams that really got me going. Troy Anderson. What were some linebackers that stuck out to you this week, Russ?
Going with the guy that you just said, Troy Anderson, 6'3", 242, former quarterback, running back
Taysom
on an
Hill.
offense. Yeah, I mean, right, this guy might be able to play a little bit of everything for you. but just really good size and just seems to be like a super instinctive player. I like the way he attacks downhill. He could definitely get his range a little bit better. I think as far as the processing and understanding exactly how to flow sideline to sideline, but he made some really impressive plays during the 3 days of practice, and I liked what I saw from him ultimately. And then you mentioned to start Chad Muma. I think kind of that guy that can do a little bit of everything. Probably the best linebacker of the bunch throughout the week. Can cover, can flow downhill, fit, and do a variety of things. So I like Chad Muma a lot. The other one was Damon Clark out of LSU, 6'2", 240. Just seemed like a guy that was, oh, there we go, was one of those guys that just had a really good flow to his game and really understood. I mean, he processed well. He was patient. And it kind of matches on tape. So I like those guys that I think like when you watch them, you're like, okay, maybe this guy actually like watches the film. And it's funny. Like you interview these players, like, we'll probably talk corners, and I'll mention Cam Taylor-Britt a little bit. You could tell like that kid watches film. And when I was talking to him, like my interview afterwards, like just we were talking different coverages and things that he does and responsibilities. And like he's a student of the game. Kind of the same thing here, with Damon Clark. I think he's somewhat of a student of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you're adding to the linebacker room, one of those three guys would be really beneficial. But it's, overall, there's a lot of linebackers to pick from. Even another guy, JoJo Doman at 6'2", 226.
You mean Matt Milano Jr.?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that dude can cover. I mean he was in the hip pocket of guys quite a bit, and that's kind of how I feel about like Grant Morgan out of Arkansas. I think he's Matt Milano 2.0. He didn't go to the Senior Bowl, but he might be that late day 3 pick that surprises quite a few people.
Got a question here on Jesse Lucetta. I've seen a couple of people, comp him to a Lorenzo Alexander type strong side backer. What are your thoughts on Lucetta out of Penn State? I know I saw some rave reviews from him. I think Joe Marino was talking him up a little bit.
Yeah, no, he had a great week. He really did. He had he was on the podium after practice one day, did a great job answering those questions after a really good practice too. And I like that comp. I mean, I really do. Like that's pretty good. And I think you could maybe see some of that, especially later in his career as he starts to learn more, because he's one of those guys. I think if you just gave him one job in the NFL, he would be really beneficial from that. But what that job is going to be, obviously, that's up to his defensive coaches. He checked in at 6'2", 261, and he moves well for it. I mean, there's a blend of speed and power to his game as he rushes off the edge. But on tape, he's versatile. I mean, there's times he's aligned in the A gap and he's dropping back and being that mid hook defender. There's times he's dropping into the flats and being that guy. So I think he's got a variety of skill sets that are going to be very valuable to a defense. He had a great week. And it's hard to predict where these guys' range is going to be because, you have so many players. They're not all going to be second and third round picks, but it just that feels like an accurate landing spot after this week because of how well he did in interviews and just how well he played.
Yeah, I know, Dave, your guy was Chad Muma, and Randy has mentioned Darian Beavers a ton from Cincinnati. Just maybe drafting a guy, letting loose of a guy like AJ Klein, who's a giant cap hit. You could save a ton of money getting rid of a guy like AJ Klein, bring in a Muma, bring in a Darren Beavers. You then have a guy to hedge your bets in case Tremaine Edmonds walks after this season. And you can maybe go into some more base 43s, give yourself a little bit more athleticism at linebacker, a bigger body out there. Dave, talk a little bit about, Chad Muma and what you like about Chad Muma.
Well, it looked like, I mean, I don't know specifically what kind of defense Wyoming runs, but I noticed they run a lot of 2 linebacker, and they also ran some base, I guess it looked like 4-3 where he was playing inside. And then obviously in 2 linebacker sets, it looked like he was there in those sets as well. So Muma is a guy to me. If I look at the Bills roster construction right now, and they have Tyler Matakevich as a special teams only type of player who's getting paid a lot, like over $2-3 million to play special teams. You have AJ Klein who's making $5 plus million. Muma seems to me like he's a pretty versatile guy. He's got speed. He can cover. He can also rush the passer. I feel like if you're the Bills and you draft a guy like Muma, you can almost kind of let him start out playing special teams, clear that cap clear that cap money that you're spending on Matakevich, and then figure out where you want to develop him maybe as a contingency to an AJ Klein departure? What are you going to do with Tremaine Edmonds beyond 2022? And so I just think drafting a guy like Muma gives you flexibility in development and figuring out where you want to put him, because I don't feel like he's a guy that, at least from watching him, and Russ would know better than me, I don't think you necessarily need to pigeonhole him into one specific linebacker spot or one scheme. I feel like he's versatile enough where you could put him, in a bunch of different places and it could work for him. So that's why I really like him. And I feel like it does a double whammy if you're the Bills, and it could potentially save you from paying for these special teams only players like a Matakevich, where you're spending, precious cap dollars on a special teams only type linebacker. So
yeah, the one thing that stinks about Matakevich is we might have to keep him now because we lost the Scottish Hammer to the New York Giants today with Gillen signing with the Giants. So you got to have at least one ginger on the roster. So Tyler Matakevich might have to stay. Might have to give him a raise at this rate. But shifting now to the defensive backfield, moving to corners. I know you want to talk a little bit about Cam Taylor-Britt, Russell, but before we do, Kendall, was it you on that film room that was comping Mario Goodrich to Levi Wallace?
I did it on accident. Yeah, I was explaining him, and Eric goes, "So you're explaining Levi Wallace?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think I am. I think that's exactly what I'm doing right now."
So that says that. So first of all, that says a lot about Levi Wallace because he was a UDFA, and we're now comping him to a second or third round draft pick, probably, or a second to fourth round draft pick for Mario Goodrich, somewhere in that range, probably day 2, maybe he slips to day 3. So Levi Wallace has worked his way up to that. But does that maybe take a guy like Mario Goodrich off your board because you're just not seeing those like step above intangibles? Or if we do lose a guy like Levi Wallace, you're content using maybe a third round pick if he's there to just replace Levi Wallace with a Levi Wallace type?
Well, let's be honest. I think the whole like athletic intangible thing is really only a thing amongst Bills Mafia and not the actual front office. So I don't think this is going to take Mario Goodrich off any boards because he's a very good processor. He understands how to keep his leverage in zone coverage, make sure, he's not too far from one guy, also close to the other. But he does have some problems in man coverage. He has tough job with, I like to call it blind spot management. He kind of lets people into his blind spot a little too easily and then loses track of them. And yeah, he doesn't have the greatest athleticism to mirror match and stay, in phase with wide receivers all the time. So I think he's someone that 100% this Bills coaching staff could coach up and develop into CB2. But do we want, as a fan base, another player like that? I think a lot of us want that day one plug and play kind of guy. And I think that's why a lot of people will have pause over Goodrich, but he is a good prospect. And I don't think that should be lost on any of this.
Russ, how about you? Who are some corners that stuck out to you in Mobile? And I know you're going to talk a little bit about Cam Taylor-Britt. When you do, safety flexibility, maybe if the Buffalo Bills looking for a DB who could maybe, if Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde leaves, shift over to safety, does he have that kind of flex? So talk a little bit about Cam Taylor-Britt and some other guys that stuck out to you in Mobile.
Well, I'll back Kendall up here on Mario Goodrich. Look, I'm going to go on a tangent here on Bills Mafia, on cornerbacks, the whole nine, because I'm a Lions fan and my team went from 1998 of Terry Fair in the first round to not drafting one again until Jeff Okuda, and this dude's sideline with the freaking Achilles right now. So let me just go on my tangent because they neglected the position. And I don't want to see the Bills do the same thing because you have a talented guy in Trey White. You look at what the Lions did with Darius Slay. They found a guy in the second round, had a great thing going. They never put anybody around him. Like, sure, you can have your guy on an island, but it doesn't matter about that island when the other side of the field's getting torched all the time. And that's what's going on here is you guys are going to start getting torched because you have Levi Wallace as your number 1 corner or number 2 corner because there's nobody
hear you say that.
I don't care. He could take his bald head, go shine my shoes. And so you need to upgrade from there. And I think if you do it in the first round, you have to consider it. And Mario Goodrich is physical at 189, has tremendous ball skills, especially the last 4 or 5 weeks of the year, does a really good job getting after it. And he didn't, overly impress me at the Senior Bowl, but that's fine. I live with the tape. I can trust the tape. A 3-day event's not going to take a guy from like here all the way up or anything. Like, it is what it is. But other guys, like first round, give me Roger McCreary from Auburn. Like, if you're talking about somebody that could play in the slot, playing in the outside as a CB2, like 5'11", 189. Sure, the 29-inch arms are a concern, but dude, he's got hips like butter. He's super fluid with his lower body, good feet, very patient. And I really like him. And I think if, he's sitting there, I would much rather take him, because the team I like him the most as far as a fit is Kansas City. And that would be the last thing I would want the Bills to do, is let him slide by so they can have the luxury of taking something else and letting this guy slip to go and lock up Gabriel Davis in a championship game or something. But beyond that, Cam Taylor-Britt, absolutely. I think he could play a little bit of safety. And he shows it on tape. You see him kind of all over the place. And I asked him, why are you all over the field? Like, is there something like that your coaches saw in you that maybe other people didn't see, like on the defensive side of the football or something, or, kind of what was it? And he just said his coaching staff really did a good job of just teaching him, showing him how to watch film and break everything down. So you'll see him as a single high safety on the outside in the slot. And I think his patience and his ball skills are really impressive, and just how well he is aware of what's going on around him. So I don't think he'll necessarily be a second or maybe even a third round pick, but if you can get there in day 3 and Cam Taylor-Britt is there, absolutely. And then just real quick, 2 other guys, Tariq Woolen from UTSA, the corner, is probably going to run he's probably going to run a sub 4.4, really good length. He's physical. It's crazy. He's got good length. He's physical, really patient. And with that athleticism, I think you look at that guy as potentially your CB2. And then the other one, just really under the radar, but he impressed every single time, especially on that rainy day. That's Gregory Jr. from Ochita Baptist. Really under the radar. You're going to have to dig in the dirt for that tape. But 5'11", 202. I thought he had good physicality. I was talking to one guy. He said he kind of reminds me of like Jason Barrett. And I was like, actually, that's pretty good, if he can stay healthy. But, pretty good length. He competed, he battled, and could be, potentially that day 3 pick that you find as potentially that player that, just kind of stands out and earns his way onto the roster.
And I'll tell you what, we got Connor coming in saying Joshua Williams late. This is a guy that I'm high on out of Fayetteville State. I look at the measurables of a guy like Joshua Williams, and I haven't seen him run yet, but I see his measurables: 6'2.5", 193, 32-inch arms. I get Kevin Johnson vibes from a guy like Josh Williams, that more bigger physical corner. How did Josh Williams, adjusting from Fayetteville State, look going up against some of these top guys at the Senior Bowl?
He did get beat a couple times. I'm not going to call him the greatest thing ever, but there were other times though that he matched up really well. And there was a time that he got beat actually on a fade route, and he got his left hand in there and then ended up not fully getting it through. So he followed through with his right hand. He made a really athletic play. And I was surprised to see him get his hips around and really just have that athleticism to make that play. So he really caught my eye. But again, there was reps that he lost. But if you're talking about him late, absolutely. I mean, I trust this secondary coach, Leslie Frazier, this defensive staff to develop one of these guys if they want to take a chance on kind of an unknown prospect in a sense.
Levi Wallace, Teron Johnson, list goes on with some of the guys that they've worked with. There.
And I want to ask you, Russ, about a guy who made a nice splashy play in the game, who I've been kind of starting to like a little bit more the more games I watch, and that's Alontae Taylor. Former wide receiver, seems to be like a super solid kid. Like, I'm sure he's a guy that, watches tape and stuff too. Seems like he's very coachable, very a guy that be really adaptable to kind of wherever the coaches feel like they might want to put him. Is he a guy that held his own in practice? Because obviously he made the nice interception in the game, but we didn't hear much. We didn't hear much about him as far as the practice week leading up to the game.
Well, there was times that I believe he was matched up against Calvin Austin and kind of struggled in that regard. But I mean, those one-on-ones aren't even fair. Yeah. Like, you're looking at 3-4 seconds, and the quarterback's just waiting until this guy's open before he throws the football. So sometimes it's not even really fair, especially when you get a pass rush. But no, I thought he looked relatively well, especially for somebody that's new to the position in a sense. Like you mentioned, former receiver, still kind of learning everything. But I think he's got kind of a physical aspect to him that I like at 196 pounds. And I think it's probably the underrated part of his game, because you look at some of these corners and we always want to talk about like hip fluidity, long speed, and things like that. We don't always think about the physicality aspect of it. And I think Taylor's pretty physical. So I would definitely want to see him, test well. And if he does, absolutely. I think he could be somebody that maybe slips under the radar and it becomes something a little bit more.
And Steve, who was it that what was it? There was a national guy who maybe mentioned that he could maybe play safety potentially.
Charles Davis mentioned that some people were eyeing him as a safety. Speaking of eyeing as a safety, Josh Thompson from Texas, where did he line up? Was he lining up at corner or was he lining up at safety?
Yeah, he was getting torched at corner.
I literally said, I literally said midseason because PFF graded him off the charts this year. He was one of the guys that PFF had ranked so much higher than almost everyone else. And, I watched him play all year and I'm like, man, this is going to be some Aaron Williams guy gets torched to move to safety vibes from Josh Thompson. Did he get looks at safety in Mobile, or was it just him getting torched at corner all week?
Yeah, I mean, he got looks kind of everywhere. And there was times that it was like, man, please go back to safety, get out of here. Like you're not going to match up against some of these other guys. Like, you're not going to match up against Calvin Austin, Vilas Jones, some of these guys that are super shifty, good release packages. But, could he match up against like a Jalen Tolbert, who's not necessarily the fastest in the world, but more of like that physical, not going to create a bunch of separation? Sure. Could he do it? But I think safety is probably the natural fit for him. But who knows? A team might roll the dice on him at corner, and it depends on how he tests. If he tests like a sub 4.4, my jaw would hit the ground. I would be so shocked.
What about a Caleb Evans? He's a guy who's got good size, almost 6'2", 201 pounds. Well, how did a Caleb Evans do out of Missouri?
Yeah, he was another one that at times got torched as well. And like I kept seeing like the Missouri thing, and I was like, man, who is this guy? Like I thought he was like a late addition, and I was like, okay, maybe he's just first day getting his feet wet. And then I looked, I'm like, oh, that's Caleb Evans. And then I go back and rewatch the practice, and it was just like there was times that he was like opening his hips too soon and letting the guys that again have that start-stop ability, letting them kind of have their way, and they figure out how to break inside, break outside. So if he can find ways to really, one, trust his back pedal and trust his speed, then I think it's okay. But I think that's why guys kind of open their hips, maybe because they're learning that bail technique a little bit too much in college. And in those one-on-ones, if you're in that bail technique, that guy's just going to go inside or something and call it a day. But I mean, I would have to watch more of him to really give like a full-on scope of where I think he'll get drafted. But just from what I saw, he got beat a couple times.
There's so many interesting corners that were in Mobile. I know not too many first rounders outside of McCreary, and maybe Darian Kendrick slips in there, but I doubt it. But
Kobe
Bryant, is he an inside guy or an outside guy?
I think he can play outside. I was watching, I'm working on a piece for us here at Cover One on why Sauce Gardner's CB1 and, be like a film breakdown type deal. And I'm watching Kobe Bryant, and he just makes some really impressive plays, man. Like he's sticky in coverage. And then when you think like, okay, he might be dead to rights and you can get that small opening, I'm going to fire one in. He finds a way to like put his hands in through the ball and make him plays through the receiver's hands. So it's impressive. He's got pretty good length. As far as like being almost 6'1", you don't necessarily say that about a guy with 30-inch arms, but he knows how to he understands how to use his arms, I should say. And he's smooth, man. He's patient. There was times that, receivers would kind of push off because he was always kind of right there. And I think as NFL draft people and college football fans, I think we kind of did Cincinnati a disservice as far as how solid Kobe Bryant and Sauce Gardner really work together as far as that tandem.
And then the last one I got here, the few clips I saw of him, he looked extra handsy, extra grabby. Tariq Castro Fields out of Penn State. What kind of week did he have?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Very grabby. I think one of those guys that knew if he didn't grab a hold, he was probably getting beat deep. And I really wonder, is he going to be somebody that potentially looks at a move to safety, or is just maybe more so of a zone corner because of, you don't want to match him up in press man situations, because if he gets beat at the line of scrimmage, it's game over. So I'm a little worried there, because I think the recovery isn't necessarily there that you want out of maybe a press man corner. But if he can play a little bit of zone or maybe play some safety, that would probably be beneficial for him. And I mean, sounds crazy, but maybe he gets lined up in the slot just in hopes that, a safety or a linebacker kind of helps over the middle or over the top.
All right. I might have to slide him out from the 7th round to a UDFA. I might, because I mean, that to me is zone only. That fits a team like Buffalo, but also a team like Buffalo, you're like, man, I'd love to see them play some more man-to-man defense. And a lot of the reasons why they probably don't is because they don't have the dogs to do it. So a guy like Tariq Castro Fields would just double down on what they don't need right now. While he could be effective because of the way a lot of zone corners are effective, it's just maybe not what we need right now. All right. To close things out here, we got to talk about my man, thick dime, Jalen Petrie. Russ, talk a little bit about Jalen Petrie from Baylor. We're not going to get too deep into the safeties here, but Jalen Petrie from Baylor, or maybe any other safety that stuck out to you here.
Yeah, Petrie for sure probably was the best safety there. If Jaquan Brisker would have participated, it probably would have been him. But Petrie's versatile, man. The tape matches. He's aggressive downhill. He moves around really well, has good range. Again, versatile. You're probably going to see him play all over for whatever defense picks him up. But after practice, he really said, learning different responsibilities out of a 4-3 defense compared to a 4-2-5 defense, and just having that trust in the different coverages and some of the different players that you have on the field, but also going from, that star role that he had to maybe that more of like a single high safety, and just he was moving all over the place for Baylor over the years. But he's very talented, really good interview. Somebody that says he wants to mold his game after Buda Baker and Tyrann Mathieu. Those are his two best two favorite players in the league. And then beyond that, Kirby Joseph, Illinois, 33-inch arms for a safety is kind of ridiculous in a sense, but he's got great ball skills. He had 5 interceptions this past year, and he really showed out. He played through the football all the time, made some really nice plays over the top. I think he's got good range. So might be one of those 3rd or 4th round guys that kind of falls under the radar. I would keep tabs on the New York Jets because they coached them, and I think that they'd be really interested. That was kind of the report today that, keep a tab on the Jets of those later round guys that they might want to develop. And I think Kirby Joseph kind of fits something, and I wouldn't be surprised if Robert Saleh fell in love with them. And then just lastly, Leon O'Neal from Texas A&M, very effective as a blitzer. I thought he did a good job diagnosing some stuff downhill. Didn't see him a ton in coverage, but I thought from a run game perspective, he was pretty good up in the box.
And then we can't close out the show without talking about punters a little bit.
Oh God.
Obviously the punt god was not in Mobile. I heard one of the guys at the Shrine Bowl, the Colorado State guy, I'm blanking on his name right now, had a great week at the Shrine Bowl, but Jordan Stout looked good in the game. Camarda looked iffy in the game, but I heard he had a good week of practice. What were the punters like there between Stout and Camarda? I know our guy Merck on Twitter is a big fan of Jake Camarda. What were your thoughts on the two punters there in Mobile?
Yeah, I mean, that second day, they both struggled. I mean, the wind was wicked. The rain was bad. I don't even think at times they were really going through stuff because they didn't want them to slip and fall and stuff like that. But realistically, like, they didn't do as well as a job as some of the previous performances that we've seen from kickers and punters, like when Tyler Bass was there and stuff. But the kid from Colorado State at the Shrine Bowl, the things I heard from people that were at the Shrine Bowl and then made their way to the Senior Bowl, they were like, man, that guy can boot it. Like during practice when nobody was watching it, he was hitting them up to like damn near the roof. So the kid out of San Diego State, obviously, and then this kid from Colorado State, I think are going to be pretty interesting names to keep tabs on if you're into punters.
Ryan Stonehouse is that punter from Colorado State.
Yes,
by the way.
That's it.
I mean, he was booting them at the East West Shrine game, but all right, gentlemen, that will do it for this evening. I appreciate it. For those of you, there was a couple people in the comment section when we were talking corners. They were like, Kyler Gordon, what do you think about Kyler Gordon? Kaiir Elam, what do you think of Kaiir Elam? A little preview here. I'll let you talk about it, Russ, but I know Wednesday you're going to be joining Anthony Prohaska on Disguise coverage, and you guys are going to be breaking down corners this week. Is that correct?
Yep. We're going to be, talking about McCreary, Cam Taylor-Britt, a handful of other guys, even those guys that you're talking about. I think Martin Emerson out of Mississippi State as well. So we're going to get into it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and, just kind of tune into it. And we're going to probably, I think he's probably going to want to break down some film. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see how it goes.
Just ask him, but he'll bust the film out. Trust me, he's got
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yes, he will.
He's been my go-to this week. I just love scrolling through his feed and watching all those different clips he's posted. Kendall, do you have anything? Are you joining us on Thursday? You got anything on tab? What we got here?
I probably will be here on Thursday. What the hell else do I have to do?
You gonna swipe right on the air raid hour on Thursday afternoon?
Hey, maybe I'll have my backdrop by then too. No, wait, that's
Ooh.
the 10th. I'll have it on the 12th. It's coming. It's coming. Gotta get official.
All right, so Kendall will be joining us, and on Thursday we will be joined by Dean Kindig of the Bills Mafia blog, obviously known on Twitter as the guy who just absolutely stalks the Buffalo Bills front office, knows where all the guys are at, where Brandon Beane is at, where Joe Shane is at, back when Dan Morgan in the day, where Dan Morgan's at. So we're gonna have Dean on with us. I know he just did a mock draft today with the Bills Mafia blog. Talk to him a little bit about some of his A+ interviews. Talk to him about where the Buffalo Bills scouts have been, and it should be a good time. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Russ, we'll let you start with a Go Lions, and then we'll close out with Go Bills. How does that sound?
Well, I'm not doing no Go Lions.
You're not going to Go Lions?
Dude, that team is the death of me. My freaking quarterback is playing in the Super Bowl, and my team's not there. It doesn't make any sense.
I assume you're rooting for Stafford, though, right? Like, you got to be.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, this was a lot of fun, guys. It's always fun talking draft. I'm glad that we were able to kind of pick away at everything. Maybe here in another week or something, we'll do like a live mock draft if you guys are up for it.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
We'll have some beers and have some fun or something.
All right.
That's a given.
100%. Mock drafts are I didn't release a mock draft on Mock Draft Monday. Oh, I'm gonna have to do one for tomorrow.
My first one drops next Monday after the Super Bowl.
Oh, I'm on 7.0 already, baby. Don't you worry.
1.0.
Just a couple of notes before we head out. Number one, if you are watching live still, first of all, kudos to you, an hour 51 in. Smash that like button on your way out. Make sure you are sharing this with anyone you think would enjoy this Air Raid Hour party every Monday and Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, here on the Cover One Sports Network. If you are watching on demand, again, kudos to you for being an hour 52 minutes into this thing. Make sure you
just wanted to hear about punters, man. That's why they went to the end.
Hitting up the comment section. Leave a comment for me or Dave. We will be checking in throughout Tuesday, throughout Wednesday, throughout Thursday afternoon. We will be responding to anyone in the comment section. And if you are listening to this in audio form, because our faces are just too ugly for you, well, we got you covered on the car ride to and from work. And if you could do us a favor for having you covered on your car ride to and from work, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, a rating, a 5-star. We would super appreciate that. And starting this week, I believe, Fridays, we're going to be doing the Free Agent Palooza. All your favorite Cover One personalities like Greg, Tom Sett, Aaron Quinn, myself, Dave, Kendall, Sterling, Anthony, we will all be involved in salary cap conversations. We're going to be breaking down Buffalo Bills, UFAs, RFAs, what kind of contracts we would or would not be willing to give them. Greg's going to work his salary cap magic and sort of predict some of the money that's going to be heading the way towards some of these free agents. And then once we break down what our UFAs are work, we'll be spending our Fridays talking about UFAs we'd like to see the Buffalo Bills go after. So Cover One's got you covered pretty much every single day of the week. And we want to thank you so much. Russ, you want to give a Go Bills, maybe just a Go draft, whatever you want,
yeah, go draft, baby.
Go draft.
Yeah, no, again, thanks a lot, guys. And as they said, smash the like button, subscribe to the podcast, leave some comments, reviews, the whole nine. Of course, find me on Twitter at RussNFLDraft. Smash that follow button. But I appreciate it, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, man. Have a good one. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.